A plant once considered more valuable than wheat now faces systematic eradication across industrial farmlands. While its cultivated cousin commands premium prices in health food stores, this wild relative grows freely in disturbed soil, offering identical nutrition without requiring a single penny of investment. The paradox runs deeper. The same corporations marketing quinoa as a superfood simultaneously manufacture herbicides specifically formulated to destroy Lambsquarters, the original wild species that sustained entire civilizations through famine, war, and crop failure. This systematic elimination of free nutrition reveals a fundamental conflict between nature's abundance and modern agricultural economics. The story of Chenopodium album, known as Lambsquarters, goosefoot, or wild quinoa, demonstrates how survival knowledge becomes suppressed when it threatens profit structures. Understanding this plant's true potential challenges the assumption that food security requires industrial intervention rather than ecological literacy. Historical records document Lambsquarters as a primary famine food across Europe, Asia, and North America during the darkest periods of human history. During World War II, when grain supplies collapsed and populations faced starvation, this wild plant became the difference between survival and death for millions. Soviet agricultural archives reveal organized harvesting of Lambsquarters seeds to supplement bread flour when traditional crops failed. The plant's resilience during the Dust Bowl era of the 1930s provided critical nutrition when wheat fields turned to desert. Indigenous North American tribes harvested Lambsquarters seeds by the bushel, processing them into flour that rivaled cultivated grains in both yield and nutritional density. Ancient European communities maintained Lambsquarters patches as insurance against crop failure, a practice that persisted until industrial monoculture replaced diverse food systems. The archaeological record shows Lambsquarters seeds stored in clay vessels alongside wheat and barley, indicating equal cultural value. This historical role as humanity's backup food supply has been deliberately erased from collective memory within a single generation. Laboratory analysis reveals that Lambsquarters leaves contain more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk, and complete protein profiles comparable to meat. A single mature plant produces between 70,000 and 100,000 seeds, each containing the full spectrum of essential amino acids that defines a complete protein source. The vitamin A content exceeds that of carrots, while vitamin C levels rival citrus fruits. This nutritional density exists without human intervention, no breeding programs, no fertilizer inputs, no irrigation systems. The seeds contain approximately 16% protein by weight, matching quinoa's composition while requiring zero agricultural investment. The leaves demonstrate higher mineral content in their wild form than any commercially bred salad green, yet modern agriculture treats them as worthless biomass to be eliminated. Research comparing wild Chenopodium species to cultivated quinoa shows minimal nutritional differences, raising questions about why one commands premium prices while the other faces chemical warfare. The plant's ability to concentrate nutrients from poor soil explains both its survival value and why depleted farmland often produces robust Lambsquarters stands while crops struggle. The classification of Lambsquarters as a noxious weed directly correlates with the expansion of chemical agriculture and the rise of herbicide-resistant crop systems. Modern farming's reliance on monoculture creates the precise conditions where Lambsquarters thrives: disturbed soil, exposed sunlight, and depleted organic matter. The plant's rapid growth and prolific seed production make it a persistent presence in simplified ecosystems, challenging the industrial model that demands absolute uniformity. Herbicide formulations specifically list Chenopodium album as a target species, with application rates calibrated to ensure complete destruction. The economic incentive becomes clear: A plant that provides free, superior nutrition directly competes with the need to purchase seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides each season. Agricultural extension services teach farmers to identify Lambsquarters in its seedling stage for immediate chemical elimination, training generations to destroy a food source their ancestors deliberately cultivated. The contrast intensifies when examining quinoa marketing, the same plant family, the same nutritional profile, but one generates profit through scarcity, while the other threatens profit through abundance. This systematic suppression represents not ignorance, but active economic protection of agricultural commodity markets. Archaeological evidence from Bronze Age European settlements reveals Lambsquarters seeds processed in volumes, suggesting intentional cultivation rather than casual gathering. Ancient grinding stones show residue patterns consistent with processing Chenopodium seeds alongside barley and wheat, indicating equal status in the grain economy. Ethnobotanical studies of indigenous American food systems document sophisticated Lambsquarters management techniques, including selective harvesting to encourage desirable traits and strategic burning to create optimal growing conditions. The plant's taxonomy reveals domestication attempts across multiple continents, with regional varieties showing characteristics of human selection, larger seeds, easier threshing, delayed germination for storage. Historical European agricultural manuals from pre-industrial periods describe Lambsquarters cultivation methods in detail, treating it as a legitimate crop rather than an invasive nuisance. The transition from cultivated resource to condemned weed coincides precisely with the mechanization of agriculture and the standardization of monoculture systems. Traditional knowledge systems maintain detailed understanding of Lambsquarters phenology, optimal harvest timing, and seed processing techniques that modern foraging guides barely mention. The loss of this cultivation knowledge represents a systematic erasure of food security options that functioned effectively for thousands of years before industrial intervention. Visual identification of Lambsquarters requires attention to specific morphological details that distinguish it from potentially toxic lookalikes in the Amaranthaceae family. The characteristic white, mealy coating on young leaves creates a frosted appearance that becomes a reliable marker even before the plant develops its diamond-shaped mature foliage. The growth pattern follows a predictable sequence: germination from disturbed soil, rapid establishment of a central taproot, development of upright stems with alternating branches, and eventual formation of dense seed clusters at branch tips. The plant exhibits remarkable variability in size, ranging from a few inches in compacted soil to over 6 feet in rich, undisturbed conditions, yet the fundamental characteristics remain consistent across all growth stages. Close examination reveals tiny, grain-like seeds developing in compressed clusters along the upper stems, each seed measuring approximately 1 millimeter in diameter with a black, shiny coat when fully mature. The root system demonstrates the plant's adaptive strategy, a deep central taproot for moisture access, combined with extensive lateral roots for nutrient scavenging. Seasonal timing proves critical for harvest planning. Spring and early summer produce tender leaves optimal for greens, while late summer and fall concentrate energy into seed production. Understanding these identification markers transforms perception from invasive pest to accessible food resource, requiring no cultivation investment. Traditional seed harvest methods for Lambsquarters involve cutting mature stems when seeds release easily from their clusters, typically indicated by the plant beginning to yellow and dry naturally. The timing window remains narrow. Too early and seeds lack full maturity, too late and they shatter onto the ground before collection. Historical processing techniques utilized simple threshing to separate seeds from chaff, followed by winnowing to remove lighter plant material. The seeds require minimal processing compared to cultivated grains, no hull removal or extensive cleaning steps necessary. Ancient drying methods involved spreading harvested stems in a shaded, ventilated area for several days before threshing, a technique that remains effective today. Leaf harvest follows different logic. Successive picking of young growth encourages continued production while maintaining plant health. The contrast with modern grain agriculture becomes stark when examining labor inputs. Lambsquarters requires no plowing, no planting, no weeding of competing species, no irrigation infrastructure, and no fertilizer application. Processing the seeds into flour involves simple grinding, producing a slightly nutty, mineral-rich powder that blends seamlessly with wheat flour or functions independently. Storage proves remarkably simple. Properly dried seeds remain viable for years in basic containers, requiring none of the climate-controlled systems demanded by commercial grains. Genetic analysis confirms that cultivated quinoa, Chenopodium quinoa, and wild Lambsquarters, Chenopodium album, share 95% genetic similarity, functioning essentially as domesticated and wild variants of the same nutritional profile. The agricultural marketing creates a bizarre economic distortion. Quinoa imported from South America retails for $15 per kilogram, while genetically similar Lambsquarters, growing freely in local fields, faces chemical elimination. This price differential exists not from nutritional superiority, but from successful branding and the creation of artificial scarcity through geographic specialization. The domestication differences prove minimal: slightly larger seeds, easier threshing, and more uniform ripening, none of which justify the enormous cost disparity when comparing nutritional value. Traditional Andean cultivation of quinoa developed over millennia in high-altitude environments, where Lambsquarters species already grew wild, suggesting the domestication process involved selection from existing Chenopodium populations rather than creation of something fundamentally new. The irony intensifies when examining commercial quinoa farming's environmental impact. Industrial cultivation, long-distance transportation, and processing infrastructure contrast sharply with Lambsquarters' zero-input, local abundance. Market dynamics reveal how agricultural commodification transforms perception. The exact same nutrients become premium superfood when packaged and imported, but noxious weed when growing freely and accessible. This economic manipulation demonstrates how food system control depends on suppressing knowledge of wild alternatives that threaten market structures. Modern food security faces unprecedented challenges from climate instability, supply chain vulnerabilities, and economic disruption. Yet Lambsquarters offers immediate resilience without requiring any infrastructure investment. The plant's ability to germinate in disturbed soil means any abandoned lot, disrupted construction site, or neglected garden corner becomes potential food production space. No seed purchase necessary. Existing soil seed banks contain viable Lambsquarters seeds that can remain dormant for decades before germinating when conditions align. The nutritional profile addresses specific deficiency risks common in crisis scenarios. Complete protein prevents muscle wasting, high mineral content counters, malnutrition, and abundant vitamins support immune function. Urban environments prove particularly suitable for Lambsquarters foraging, as the plant thrives in the disturbed soil conditions characteristic of cities and readily colonizes cracks in pavement, vacant lots, and untended landscaping. The rapid growth cycle, from germination to seed production in approximately 60 days, means multiple harvests within a single growing season, creating continuous food availability. Knowledge of Lambsquarters identification and processing creates immediate food security independent of functioning markets, agricultural systems, or supply networks. This resilience becomes especially valuable when examining historical precedents. Every major food crisis of the past century saw survivors utilizing wild Chenopodium species, while those dependent solely on conventional agriculture faced starvation. The herbicide industry's sustained campaign against Lambsquarters reveals fundamental tensions between ecological abundance and agricultural economics. Modern farming's increased chemical dependency directly correlates with the systematic elimination of plants, offering free nutrition, creating markets for purchased inputs by destroying natural alternatives. Glyphosate-based herbicides specifically target broadleaf plants like Lambsquarters, while protecting engineered crop varieties, creating chemical dependency loops where farmers must purchase both resistant seeds and corresponding herbicides. The environmental impact extends beyond target species. Herbicide application eliminates entire categories of wild nutrition while degrading soil microbiology that supports natural fertility. Economic analysis shows that the cost of herbicides used to eliminate Lambsquarters from a single acre often exceeds the market value of purchasing equivalent nutrition in processed form. This mathematical absurdity, spending money to destroy free food, demonstrates how agricultural systems prioritize market participation over actual food security. The chemical approach creates perpetual dependency. Herbicide application must continue indefinitely because Lambsquarters seed banks persist in soil for decades, germinating whenever chemical pressure temporarily ceases. Alternative agricultural systems that integrate rather than eliminate Lambsquarters demonstrate superior resilience and reduced input costs, yet face systematic exclusion from agricultural subsidies and research funding that preferentially support chemical-intensive approaches. Ecological farming systems demonstrate that Lambsquarters integration produces superior outcomes compared to chemical warfare approaches. The plant's deep taproot mines subsoil minerals that become available to shallow-rooted crops when Lambsquarters vegetation decomposes, effectively functioning as a biological fertilizer pump. Strategic tolerance of early-season Lambsquarters growth provides beneficial insect habitat and draws pest pressure away from cash crops during critical establishment periods. The biomass production rivals cover crops specifically planted for soil improvement, yet requires no seed purchase or planting labor. Research comparing organic systems that integrate wild plants versus conventional systems that eliminate them shows improved soil structure, increased beneficial insect populations, and reduced long-term pest pressure in integrated systems. The edible yield from Lambsquarters harvested alongside primary crops often exceeds the value of crops lost to competition, especially when calculating the true nutritional value rather than commodity market prices. Traditional agricultural systems across cultures maintained this integration knowledge, treating Lambsquarters as a companion species rather than a competitor. Modern permaculture research rediscovers these principles, documenting how diverse plant communities, including weeds, demonstrate greater stability and resilience than monocultures. The economic logic shifts dramatically when viewing Lambsquarters as a co-crop, providing nutrition, mulch, and mineral cycling, rather than as a target for elimination requiring purchased chemical inputs. The systematic suppression of Lambsquarters knowledge represents a broader pattern in industrial agriculture, the elimination of free abundance to create market dependency. Yet this ancient survival resource persists despite chemical warfare, genetic engineering of competing crops, and deliberate erasure from agricultural education. The plant's biological resilience ensures that knowledge of its value remains immediately applicable. No waiting years for fruit trees to mature or building complex infrastructure. A single season of observation and harvest practice provides sufficient skill to access this nutrition indefinitely. The contrast between marketed quinoa and vilified Lambsquarters exposes the arbitrary nature of food valuation in modern economies, where branding and artificial scarcity determine price rather than nutritional reality. Climate uncertainty and economic instability increase the relevance of foods requiring zero inputs and thriving in disturbed conditions that defeat conventional agriculture. The choice becomes clear: continue dependency on systems requiring continuous chemical and economic inputs, or reclaim knowledge of plants offering free nutrition through simple recognition and harvest skills. This lost wisdom awaits rediscovery not in ancient texts or distant locations, but in the very fields and vacant lots where industrial agriculture wages chemical war against abundance. Understanding Lambsquarters transforms it from weed to free superfood, revealing how much genuine food security depends on ecological literacy rather than market participation.